Good afternoon. My name is Young-gil Kim. I am the president of the Handong Global University. I am the moderator of this session entitled The Strategy for Improving Educational Quality of Undergrad Schools and Producing Creative Human Resources. For this session, we have pretty eminent speakers from the US, also from Korea. And the first speaker will be the President David Colton. He is the president of the Cornell University. And would you please stand? Big hand. And since he has to leave for taking the airplane, so I gave, so you may leave after your talk, okay?
No, I want to stay to hear the other speakers.
Oh, okay. Anyway, the other speaker I will introduce later, and because the speaker from Japan, he's in the other session, he will join later. In the meantime, I'd like to think about the president of the Olin College, Richard Miller. Would you please stand up? Just stand up. Also from the director of MIT, Lori Breslow, director at MIT of the Teaching and Learning Laboratories. And also we have the discussant, Professor Park Sung-chul from Sungkyunkwan University. And we'll start, one big hand again to the President David Colton of the Cornell University.
Kamsahamnida, President Kim. A broad liberal arts education is often seen, especially in these days, as less important and less practical than focused training in the sciences, engineering, mathematics, and technology. And my thesis today is that, in fact, in the current world situation, a liberal arts education is the most important aspect of undergraduate education. Despite the relative invisibility and lack of immediate obvious relevance to the demands of a science-based knowledge economy, the liberal arts provide the most useful and versatile education available to today's undergraduates as they prepare not only for work, but for life and citizenship. To defend this thesis, I will begin by defining a liberal education. In terms of subject areas, as I'm using the term, liberal education balances scientific, mathematical, and technical literacy with a grasp of history, politics, ethics, language study, other humanistic fields, and the arts. In terms of the goals and methods, a liberal education is traditionally understood to involve acquiring knowledge and understanding about a variety of areas with some depth and breadth, and learning to think critically about these and other areas. Oral discussion and written skills are both ways of learning and skills in themselves. This traditional understanding of liberal education in the Western world has roots in ancient Greece, from young training of young people in reading, writing, arithmetic, music, and gymnastics, to secondary schools' emphasis on literature, rhetoric, and oratory. Skilled writing and speaking all were highly valued. An Asian parallel, in my view, can be found in the life and teaching of Confucius, who mastered the 6 arts of ritual, music, archery, charioteering, calligraphy, and arithmetic, as well as classical poetry and history. In modern times, the traditional understanding of liberal education in the West owes much to John Henry Newman, who in the middle of the 19th century, in a book I recommend to you called The Idea of a University, explained how a university education should shape a student's habits of mind. Liberal education, Newman summarized, is simply the cultivation of the intellect. Like many contemporary educators, I take a view of liberal education that encompasses these ideas, but is additionally expansive and pragmatic, emphasizing citizenship, service, community, and cultural pluralism. This view is based on what I see happening in liberal education today, and also what I believe our global society needs from educated citizens. An emphasis on diversity, multiculturalism, and individual expression that is common in American higher education today does serve these goals, as well as a focus on service, something that is part of the heritage of many universities in the U.S. and Asia, including Cornell. What happens to the liberally educated student after graduation? That's obviously a very important question in difficult financial times. Has this type of education prepared the individual for a 21st century workplace? Of course, there is great demands in the workplace for employees who have specific skills in engineering, mathematics, and most branches of science, subjects in which the liberal arts graduate is expected to have some grounding, but not necessarily advanced or focused knowledge. In the U.S., in fact, we hear repeated concerns that our economy lacks sufficient numbers of workers with these skills in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Many in our own corporate communities and beyond fear that the preparation of American students is lagging relative to those of other countries, especially in Asia, and particularly in East Asia, where student achievement in math and science is often more advanced. In fact, the most recent report from the International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement shows that 8th grade students in the U.S. were outscored in math by students from 5 Asian countries and outscored in science by students from 9 countries in Asia and Europe. And according to the American National Science Foundation, about 1/3 of bachelor's degrees in the United States are in science or engineering fields, whereas in 5 Asian countries the proportion was more than 50%. In South Korea, the number of first university degrees in engineering doubled from 1995 to 2005. But it is very important that we remember and remind our students that the pace of modern technological development will render much of our current knowledge quickly obsolete. Compare the knowledge and skills required today with those required only 10 years ago, not only in fields such as biotechnology and medicine, but as well in feature film production, automotive design, and many other fields. Once in the workplace, the graduate in a scientific or engineering field often needs to devote considerable time and effort to keep up with advances in engineering and other techniques. But the skills, perceptions, and habits of mind developed in a liberal education are of permanent value, adaptable to a wide range of tasks and responsibilities. One such attribute that we focus on more and more in the U.S. is the ability to think critically and problem solve about a variety of subjects, especially those outside one's immediate sphere of expertise, as the average number of careers for an American finishing college in these days is 10 different jobs during one's career. The ability to express oneself clearly, precisely, and effectively, both orally and writing, is of great use even in the most technical of fields and is commonly cited by high technology employers in the U.S. and Western Europe as one of the most essential skills. The liberal arts student also acquires breadth of mind, that is, facility with a variety of fields and study, and the cross-fertilization of ideas between those fields. For example, a history study of the Industrial Revolution in Europe may incorporate ideas about law, social welfare, technology, and economics, very relevant to the modern day. A related attribute very relevant to this beautiful conference is a related attribute of cross-cultural understanding, often gained in the course of a liberal education, not so much from one's classroom studies, but from working and living with students, staff, and faculty from a wide variety of backgrounds. This conference is evidence that learning about different cultures and studying with diverse people contributes to a global perspective and an appreciation of cultural differences, increasingly vital in a world in which business, technology, and communication are no longer limited by national boundaries. A strong liberal education, then, helps to develop individuals who bring to any workplace the ability to reason and to think critically in any context, strong communication skills, a broad-minded openness to new ideas, especially those that challenges one's own beliefs, a global outlook, and true respect for diverse cultures throughout the world, with a sense of personal value and ethical considerations. It is worth noting that many colleges and universities are trying to develop now special programs that go back and add elements of ethics and other humanistic training to an increasingly technological set of curricula. A major in science and technology studies is an example of such a program at Cornell University within a broad liberal education attuned to contemporary and future workplaces. We should also be aware that concentrating too exclusively on the role of undergraduate education in preparing students for a first job may not be doing the justice to our students, given the number of careers and jobs that individuals will face in a rapidly changing economy. I have joined with many others in the United States, particularly through an organization called the Business Higher Education Forum, in calling for improved approaches to helping young people prepare for careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And I hope to be understood that these skills are very, very important in a global knowledge-based economy. We need to attract more and more students to these areas. Nevertheless, we also need to focus, especially in these times, on support for the arts and humanities, ethical training, and communication in a broad liberal context. Each skill or habit of mind that I have attributed to liberal education and praised for its utility in the 21st century workplace is also of value to personal and civic life. Critical thinking and sound reasoning, cogent writing and clear speaking, all are valuable and often essential in business and industry. Breadth of mind and cross-cultural understanding are useful not simply because we do business across national borders, but because nations have political relationships and their citizens have personal interactions across borders and cultures. So far as governmental actions are influenced by public opinion, every country increasingly needs citizens whose opinions are formed not by prejudice, but by knowledge and cross-cultural understanding. As for the attribute that I have ascribed to liberal education, an understanding of ethics, nothing could be more essential to civic life in the 21st century. What is the right stance of our laws and regulations concerning immigration, health care, abortion, taxation, economic assistance for the poor? These are ethical questions, and yet they are in the public arena every day in every country. The need for informed and involved citizens is not lessened, but increased by the importance of science and technology in our daily lives and in our economic productivity. The arts and humanities nurture our creative instincts. They keep and convey our cultural heritage and open to us other cultures around the globe. They help us explore what it means to be fully human, including both ethical and aesthetic dimensions. They encourage questioning and independent thinking and prepare us to resist being manipulated or silenced. The civic function of the humanities and of liberal education more generally is an essential attribute of a healthy society. As we look to science and technology to shape important aspects of our future, we should also recognize that in the workplace and in public life, our citizens need the skills and habits of mind that a liberal education provides. This broader concept of liberal education is driven by a vision of what it means to be an educated person in the contemporary world. Such a person, I believe, is equipped for personal and civic life, as well as a work life that is productive, satisfying, and essential to the global economy of the 21st century. Kamsahamnida.
Thank you, President Skoltons. Your excellent presentation. President Skolton emphasized the importance of liberal education. This is really important. And for last several years, and we emphasize only technicals, memorization, and that is a very short life. And for liberal education is very important in the 21st century. So he emphasized the critical thinking, analytical reasoning, written communication, and problem solving, or ethics, and cross-cultural mindset. These are what we need in the college. They don't educate in the graduate schools. We have to educate in the undergrad schools. And Cornell is one of the forerunner of the emphasizing. Thank you for your excellent presentation. Next speaker is, can you go up there? Speaker is the president of the Olin College of Engineering, Richard Miller. And he actually the chartered first founding president of the Olin colleges in the recently most recent engineering college in the States, emphasizing innovation, creativities, not like at the big universities. So this Olin College is a real, most short history, but it's giving a big impact in the American engineering education. I'd like to welcome President Richard Miller. Please give a big hand.
Thank you. It's a real privilege to be back in Korea where we have so many friends. Let me just say that Olin College is a very small place. It's a very new place, and it has been beneficiary of so many gifts and so many contributions from others. From Korea this year, we have 4 exchange students from KAIST. We also welcomed a new student this fall from Minjok Academy. There's an increasing number of Korean students that apply for admission to Olin every year, and we're very grateful for that. In addition, we owe a debt to Cornell University. Our founder, Franklin Olin, the fellow who provided the money for starting our school, was a graduate of Cornell University, and the first building that he gave was the chemical engineering building on the Cornell University campus. He also happened to be a professional baseball player. I'm not sure if you all knew this. At any rate, we have a great debt to Cornell University, and we also, of course, have a great debt to MIT. Many of our faculty members came from MIT, and the deans of engineering at MIT have been on our advisory council from the beginning. So I want to thank everyone for their help. So I want to talk about 3 things. I want to talk about motivations and philosophy. I want to talk a little bit about the curriculum, and then very quickly about some early results, outcomes. So you've already heard a little about America's nervousness about the decline in interest in science and engineering among our undergraduate students. What you see in this graph is that less than 5%, I think 4.8% of the bachelor's degrees to students across America were in engineering in the last year, and I think the percentage is dropping. This is symptomatic of a bigger issue. This has been talked about now for quite a while in the United States. Thomas Friedman wrote a famous book, The World is Flat, A Brief History of the 21st Century, in which he lays out the effects of globalization on the American economy. There are lots of books there that you can read. The last one, the National Academy of Engineering's Educating the Engineer of 2020, lays out an agenda for the improvements needed in engineering education. Much like the comments that President Skorton made, they aim at a broader education than simply science and technology. In particular, teamwork, communication, creativity, leadership, entrepreneurial thinking, and so forth. The conclusion from these studies is quite simple. It's really not just about knowledge. It isn't enough to get 100% on a multiple choice test that has all of the information in science and mathematics. It's now more about attitudes, behaviors, and motivations. These are the things that persist. Knowledge today is becoming more like a commodity. You can find this on the internet through Google. If my doctor diagnoses me with a disease today, by tomorrow at 5 p.m., I'll know nearly as much about the disease as he does. The difference, of course, is his knowledge in attitudes, behaviors, motivations, and experience. So what kinds of attitudes and behaviors are we talking about? Entrepreneurial thinking, teamwork and leadership, creativity and innovation. And let me say a little bit about creativity. It's a very common theme in higher education to emphasize critical thinking as a primary objective for a higher education. And no one, I think, would disagree that we want graduates who are rigorous in their train of thought. But I personally am a little worried that we may be missing the point a little bit by emphasizing critical. And there are other ways to say this. Besides critical thinking, I think we need to be thinking more along creative thinking. And these two are actually at 2 different ends of the axis. Critical thinking, think for literature for a minute. When you teach people about literature, thinking about critical approaches to literature, you learn to critique others' work. You learn to be hypersensitive and unhappy with most everything that they do. On the other hand, creative thinking requires a completely different type of approach. Not everything important in life do you learn from a book. A lot of the things that are most important come from inside, and you need to learn to listen to that voice on the inside, and that's where creativity comes from. So, thinking about creativity, there are a few simple definitions here. These are words which are commonly used, and I think sometimes in confusing ways. Creativity is the process of having original ideas and insights. Inventiveness is the process of having original ideas and insights that have value. Innovation, on the other hand, is the process of having original ideas and insights that have value and then going beyond to implement them by taking initiative and touching many people's lives. Until you have changed things, you haven't really created an innovation. The most dramatic and profound innovations in our society are the ones that spread so quickly and so pervasively that a few years later you can't remember what the world was like before they were created. So our mission at Olin is to try to create a process for generating engineering innovators. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about the process of innovation. Our higher education today, in the US at least, most everyone is educated in the same way in K through 12, but by the time they get to college, they go off to major in some specific area, like science and technology, in which their whole universe might lie inside of this circle called feasibility. They study the world from the point of view, is it feasible? Those who go off to study business spend their entire life on the part of the campus where people talk about viable business plans. It's all about viability. Those who major in liberal arts might talk more about human concerns involving desirability. But in fact, innovation requires the simultaneous solution of all three. Innovation only occurs at the intersection of these. So if you're going to create innovators, they need to know what those other two dimensions are and have an instinctive feel for them. We talk to our students a lot about lifelong learning. And one of the things that I'm amazed at is how little our own faculty members are committed to lifelong learning. And by this I mean, for example, something simple, read at least one book in every semester that is nonfiction in an area outside of your major. So some of my own reading in the last year or two has been on creativity, and it's amazing some of the things that you can find. I think this book on studio thinking that comes out of Harvard University is really quite interesting. And this last book about the talent code provides a lot of good advice about how people learn and about how creative excellence is developed. If you don't do anything else as a result of this talk, I would highly advise you to go to your computer and internet, select Sir Ken Robinson, and the first link that will come up, if you put TED in there, is his TED presentation on creativity. It's likely to change the way you think about education. We've also done a lot of thinking about the way people learn. Howard Gardner, a professor at Harvard University in cognitive science, wrote a book in 1983 called Frames of Mind. This book talks about multiple intelligences and points out that there are multiple circuits that go on in the brain simultaneously that you're not aware of. Many of them are involved in making decisions that have to do with creativity and also the ability to think and act and make decisions about interpersonal relations in ways which do not pass through your conscious brain. In order to create innovators, you need people who are not only academically prepared through the study of science, math, and liberal arts, but also artistically prepared, creative, and have the gift of persuasion and the ability to manage others through teamwork. So we personally look for graduates of that kind. Let me talk a little bit about Olin College now. What is this place? It's an undergraduate residential engineering college. Currently has about 300 students. You can read the rest down at the bottom in red. We have no academic departments, we have no tenure, and we have no tuition. Well, we have no tuition today. We will have low tuition next year. The financial crisis has gotten to us like it has so many other places. And we have a profound commitment to continuous improvement. It's not enough that Olin creates an innovative program today. We are supposed to be sort of a petri dish or a test tube that constantly is on the leading edge of change, which is the most difficult thing I've found to lead. This is what the campus looks like if you were to come and visit us. This is where it's located in Massachusetts near Boston. And that little map there shows you roughly where our students come from. And you'll see that more students come from California than from any other state. We do have some from New England, a little over 10%. So you remember this graph about creating innovation as the intersection of feasibility, viability, and desirability. Our vision of that is to work with our neighbors. So Olin College's universe is about feasibility. We are an engineering school, but we are adjacent to Babson College, the #1 entrepreneurship school in the country, and our students cross-enroll there deliberately so that they won't understand what they're learning. The idea is that we don't want them to think that they're learning engineering or they're learning business. They're just learning. You have to have all of these pieces in order to make sense out of it. They're also cross-enrolled at Wellesley College, where they learn about the human dimensions to life. This is some of the features of our curriculum, very quickly. We have every student at Olin has to be interviewed because we're looking for multiple intelligences and we can't figure out how to do that from anything on a piece of paper. We also have a design core in the center of our curriculum rather than an analysis core. Engineering has become a field which is dominated by applied science these days. We're trying to create an alternative which has design in the center with applied science in a supportive role. In addition to that, every student has to complete at the end of their program what we call a scope project. It's a year-long project that they work for a corporation. The companies are providing $50,000 per year to support the project. We have 15 of those underway today. Another thing, engineers are not known as people who are very good at public speaking. In fact, in the US, there's a big joke about this. How can you tell an extroverted engineer? He's the one who's looking at your shoes when he talks. So what are we going to do about it? At Olin, every student at the end of every semester has to stand and deliver in front of the entire community something from their project work. So in fact, we have essentially a 2-day conference in which we shut down the campus. And every student either gives a lecture or a presentation in front of a group of 100 visitors, most of them from corporations, for evaluation. So by the time they've graduated, every student has done this 8 times. Personally, I think this probably is more responsible than anything else for the change that we've seen in the skills that the students have when they graduate. Olin is committed to continuous improvement too, as I mentioned before. So everything at Olin has an expiration date. Our bylaws has an expiration date. It has to be reinvented. Our curriculum expires every 7 years. It has to be reinvented. And every student has to start and run a business as a graduation requirement. This is in order to teach them the process. So very quickly, I'm just going to buzz through this. We've expanded the definition of what engineering is. It's not just about those 3 things in the middle where you start with specifications for a device and you end up with a prototype. Nope, you back up to the beginning and you start with people and you learn what people need. And you end this at the very bottom by starting a business or an innovation which will change people's lives. An example of this is a course in the sophomore year where students do a sociological study of a group of clients that they pick, whoever it is they want. This particular group was bicycle messengers who deliver messages in downtown Boston on bicycles. They went and lived with them for about 5 weeks to learn what their problems were. The students originally thought, well, I'm an engineer, so I'll create something technical like a very elaborate bicycle lock. After talking to the bicycle messengers, they found their biggest problem was that they kept getting into accidents because these people like to listen to the radio all the time, and then the dispatcher tells them you have to go to a different place, and they have these big, thick gloves on, and they can't fool with the radio, and so they run into a car or a truck or something, and they all have broken bones. So what they did was they created a button. This is the whole technological device. This button fits on their chest, and they just hit it with their glove, and it switches back and forth from the radio that they like to listen to and the dispatcher. And this is when they're sophomores. They already have intellectual property now that's patentable when they're sophomores. When they go into the junior year, they learn how to invent the device that goes inside of it. That's just a styrofoam mock-up at that point. This is an illustration of what the senior project looks like, the organization structure with the external company. That's a list of the companies that we've had in recent years that have been sponsoring our projects to the tune of $50,000 each. They have to start and run a business before they graduate, as you know. And this is done in conjunction with Babson College. So we've given them a house. This is about a 6,000 square foot house that belongs to the students. We have about 15 student businesses that are run in there. And they have their own board of directors, a group of people who are venture capitalists to help them start business. One of the problems is that we've successfully infected them with entrepreneurial disease. So some of them would just as soon not graduate. One of them had a business that was valued at over $1 million before he graduated and hasn't gone to work for anyone yet. It's really, though, beyond the curriculum. I don't think it matters whether, if you're involved in trying to innovate in engineering education, it won't do you much good to take down notes to see exactly what Olin College is doing and try to do the same. It won't work in your environment. It's about the learning culture, as Chuck Vest said. Now, the last part of this, last 3 slides. So is it working? Olin's graduates are doing remarkable things. I can tell you that. They're very good students coming in. Their average SATs are over 1,500, the math and verbal part combined. But we're not selecting for that. On the way out, we've had students who were Rhodes finalists. We've had Fulbright scholars every year, 1 or 2 of them, 4 National Science Foundation doctoral fellows in the first year, 3 honorary mentions in that competition. Students are studying nuclear physics at Oxford. We have a bunch at MIT, at Stanford, at Berkeley, Caltech, and so on. But that's anecdotal. How can you tell whether that wouldn't have happened anyway? So the Pew Charitable Trust, about 10 years ago in the United States, began worrying about measuring whether or not universities were achieving what they set out to achieve in ways which go beyond what U.S. News and World Report does. It's not just about measuring the resources available and not just the superficial reputation of the school, but looking at the outcomes that students have. So they developed this thing called the Survey of Student Engagement, the National Survey of Student Engagement at Indiana University. It touches about 700 universities now. About 500,000 students are involved in it every year. It's a series of questions, maybe 50 or 60 of these questions. And they've organized the results into 5 major areas that they believe in education research are well correlated with the kinds of learning to think for yourself, learning to be an educated and creative person. And that's for the 5 results. Now, Olin has been participating in this from the beginning because we're quite interested to know whether our work is working. Some of the results that we have, you can see on this graph. They do the study for first-year students, and they do it again for seniors as they graduate. And what you're looking at on this graph are comparative results for the 5 different questions for Olin College versus 3 other groups. The group in Olin is the blue bar. The bar that is sort of purple is for a group of about a dozen selective undergraduate engineering schools that we have data for. The group represented by the white bar is data for about 14 highly selective liberal arts colleges in the United States. And you can't see this bar, but this little flat spot, almost sort of light green to the right, is the average for all 700 universities in the U.S. that are involved in the study. So that's the one with 500,000 students. And what this graph actually does is it takes the mean score from that group, it subtracts the mean score for the NISI study entirely, and it divides it by the standard deviation, so it's essentially the normalized score. So we're measuring our results relative to the standard normal distribution. And what you can see is that we're about a standard deviation above in all of those measures in the first year, and in the senior year it's about the same. Although you can see the academic rigor in liberal arts colleges challenges ours in the senior year. So that's what I had to say, and I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you for your excellent presentation, Richard Miller. And we are very fortunate to having this lecture, actually the founding president of the Olin colleges. He told about educational philosophies and the purpose for 21st century. And he emphasized the creative thinking and innovations and teamwork and leadership and entrepreneurial thinkings. Also, it's very interesting, he emphasized outcome. When freshmen entered, after 4 years, what's the learning outcome? In Korea, we just entering, that's it. And now I think that we have to think about what's the actually university's value adding. And he emphasized, and we will talk more in the discussion sessions. Thank you again for your, I think, big hand to the president. This time, we like to introduce the Dr. Lolly Breslow. He is a director of teaching and learning laboratory at MIT. And Breslow is director of the TLL at MIT. Also, he was one of the coordinator of the open courseware, the widely now used in the world. And she is also the senior lectures at the Sloan School of the MIT School of Management. And this time, we'd like to listen from the Dr. Lolly Breslow. Please give a big hand.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to tell you that MIT is about 20 minutes away from Olin, and every time I hear President Miller talk about Olin College, I want to ask him, can I leave MIT and come work for you? So we'll see if we can work something out. There we go. I just want to say it is an honor and a privilege to talk to you this afternoon. This is my first trip to Korea. I have met so many warm and wonderful people, and I hope that I get to come back. It's been a very short trip, and so I know the hotel very well, but I don't know Korea very well. So I hope thank you very much. I will. Now I got a job offer and an offer to come back. Very good. Okay. I thought about what I could tell you about how undergraduate education can be improved based upon my 20 years now of working at MIT. The Teaching and Learning Laboratory does two things. We work with all of the faculty and the PhD students at MIT to help improve teaching and learning. And we also do research into what's called STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. So out of all of that, I want to talk about 3 points. I think undergraduate education can be improved by first refocusing efforts from teaching to learning, and I think that President Miller has given you a very, very good summary of how that's done at Olin. Secondly, that we should redress the balance between teaching content and strengthening transferable skills. And as I said at the beginning, I have 3 points, so there are 2 there. And here's the third one, persuading the faculty to do both. And from what I have understood from my colleagues in higher education in Korea, this is not only a problem in the United States, but also a problem in Korea as well. We know very much about how students learn. There has been, I would say, over the last 30 years, an explosion of research in understanding how college students learn. And if there is, I think, one overriding finding from all of that research, it is that students, and I would say human beings, not only college students, do not learn by doing what I'm doing right now, which is just talking to you. You cannot open somebody's head and pour information into it, but we know that people construct knowledge and they construct their own sense of meaning, and that I believe that we have to teach from that understanding. So this is a quote that I like very much by Richard Hake. He is a professor emeritus at Indiana University. It's interesting that we both have something from Indiana University. He was a physicist, and he says, student learning is strengthened by the interactive engagement of students in heads-on always. And by that he means making people think in the classroom, helping them to think in the classroom, and by usually hands-on activity that is doing something in the classroom besides just listening to the lecturer, and that people learn by getting immediate feedback through discussion with other students and, of course, with their instructors. Now, what I'd like to do is to give you an example of how we have tried to implement that knowledge at MIT. What you see here is a schematic of what we call the TEAL classroom. TEAL stands for Technology-Enabled Active Learning, and it was the effort to change how the first two required courses of physics at MIT were taught. We moved from a lecture recitation model to what's called a studio physics model. So a couple of things about that schematic. First of all, you'll notice that there are tables. The students sit in tables of 9. They're put into groups of 3, teams of 3 that they work with throughout the semester. You'll also notice that that kind of box in the middle is the instructor's lectern, so that the instructor is not doing, again, what I'm doing right now, which is standing in front of you, but he or she is in the middle of the classroom, in the middle of the students, and it takes the authority away from the instructor and instead says, just by the way the room is organized, that we are all going to be learning together. What happens in TEAL is that the instructor will talk about a concept for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and then the students have to do something with that concept. And that do something can be to analyze some data. In groups of 3, they each have a laptop. It could be to do what we call a desktop experiment. But again, they're heads-on and hands-on in their learning. I'd like to show you just a little clip from students working in the TEAL classroom. I apologize for the sound. It's not going to be easy to hear what they're saying. Even if you heard, if you're not a physicist, you probably wouldn't understand. Anyway, I don't understand what they're talking about. But what's really important and what I would like you to focus on is the students' nonverbal behavior. So look at particularly the African American student and watch what happens as he comes to understand something.
Area is, you have 2 radii.
Pi r squared minus
Pi
r squared.
r outer squared minus r inner squared, right?
Oh, wow. Look at
So this is 2 pi m over 4 pi r outer to the 4th minus r inner to the 4th divided by r outer squared minus r inner squared.
Oh, and you count, because you do the difference of squares and cancel those out.
That's it.
Wow.
Okay? Sure. Yep.
We're going to watch just a little bit of the TEAL
And then
classroom.
get on to the Kepler motion problem. So I'd like to begin by just looking at our experiment that we just did.
Okay. So did you hear the oh wow as the student realized, understood? And I've been teaching for 30 years, and if I can get an oh wow out of the students, then I think I've done a good day's work. This is what we want to have happen in the classroom. Now, as President Miller said, we also need to understand something about outcomes. So we have, in fact, done a very rigorous assessment of TEAL. We had a particular moment on campus when we had some students going through the traditional lecture recitation and other students who had taken TEAL. We did what's called a pre-test, post-test design. So we gave students a test at the beginning of the semester. It didn't count toward their grade. We didn't care what they knew. We just wanted to understand where their base of knowledge was. And then we gave them a similar post-test, and what you can see is for groups that began with not very much knowledge, groups that had some knowledge, and groups of students that had high knowledge, all of them did better on the post-test at the end of the semester. And I should say as well that this pre-test, post-test did not necessarily ask students to work formulas, because MIT students are very good at working formulas. But rather, it tested their conceptual knowledge, in this case of electromagnetism. And then what we did is we had that same group of students and we followed them, and about 12 to 18 months after they took electromagnetism, either in TEAL or in the lecture recitation format, we gave them what we call the post-post test, and there is less of a difference in terms of retention of concepts, but still the TEAL students retain more conceptual knowledge than the students who took the course in the lecture recitation format. We know that teachers can strengthen learning in a variety of ways. We know that if they connect new information to prior knowledge, if we begin with where the students are, what they understand, and what their sometimes implicit assumptions about the body of knowledge is, we can build from there. And there's been a great deal of research, again, in physics education. The physicists have in many ways led the rest of the science and engineering community about students coming in with misconceptions. And now I'm going to be what I call skating on very thin ice, because I don't know very much about physics, but I know, for example, that my physics colleagues tell me that the students don't understand, even after 4 years, force equals mass times acceleration, Rick? Okay, times acceleration. They think that it is force equals mass times speed. And don't ask me to explain that, but we know that this is a fundamental misunderstanding conceptually, and it is because we have not done a very good job of being explicit about that misunderstanding connecting to prior knowledge. We know that teaching can be strengthened by providing opportunities for what's called practice at retrieval. This is the work of Diane Halpern and others, and what it means is that we want to ask students to explain things in different contexts. So at MIT, using OCW, we now have a program called Flash Forward, Flash Back, which connects some of the fundamental mathematics courses and calculus with some of the upper-level engineering courses, so that the students can go back and forth to understand how the math is actually used in an engineering concept. Or when they get to their engineering courses, if they did not understand it the first time, they can go back to the OCW site for mathematics and begin to make that connection. And it's a very good example of practice at retrieval. We know that we want to vary conditions under which learning takes place, so that if we ask students in different venues to explain concepts, then we have strengthened transfer, what we call transfer and retention. And that, I would argue, is what we want to do with the university education. We want to be able to have students retain knowledge, but more importantly, to transfer it so that when they are out in the real world, then they can take what we have taught them and use it in the context in which they find themselves. And finally, we know that if we chunk information, we can extend working memory. So this is a finding from cognitive psychology, and I'm going to try to practice what I am just preaching. So I'm going to do a little interactive exercise with you. Are you ready? Does everybody have pen and pencil? Okay. So there's a schematic with Arabic numerals and with partial boxes, if you will, that represent those Arabic numerals. All right, I'll give you a minute to study that. I see one person is trying to copy it down, and that's cheating, so no, I'm going to move very quickly. All right, so here are the boxes again, and I will give you just a minute to put down what the Arabic numbers are that correspond to those boxes. All right? How many of you got at least 3 of them? 3 of them? Ah, very good. So I do this all around the world. 3 is very, very good. 4? Anybody 4? Oh, I see 1 4. 5? It's very hard. But now, there are the answers. Now I give you this. I give you a framework. And if I give you a framework from which to work, it is very easy to recreate those boxes. Now, this is as simple as coming into class and putting an agenda on the board. There's another example of a framework. Now, I said that I had 3 main points. The first one was using what we know about learning in the classroom, moving from teaching to learning. The second one was redressing the balance between content knowledge and what I've heard over and over again at the conference, what some of us in education call transferable skills. And that's problem solving and critical thinking and creativity and communication. Now, why do I say redress the balance? Because at MIT, the faculty are very concerned about making sure that the students get the 27 topics that are listed in the syllabus. And so they will go through those 27 topics with lightning speed. But if we are to teach these kinds of transferable skills, we need to give up some of the content to provide opportunities for students to learn these kinds of things. So let me give you just one example. The Teaching and Learning Laboratory videotapes faculty, and then we sit down and we watch the video with the faculty member, and we point out what the faculty member is doing very well with teaching and what he or she could improve on. So I've seen about, I would guess, 500 to 600 classes now at MIT. I think they should give me a degree, but I can't persuade them to do that. What I've noticed in many times is that as the faculty is on the board writing the equations, they will sometimes either make a mistake or not know what the next symbol should be. And what they'll do is they'll just stop for a second and then eventually get the formula. That is a perfect moment to say to the students, here is where I'm confused. Here's why I can't figure out if it should be a plus or a minus sign. And this is an example of how I go about solving a problem. If we model for students those kinds of skills, then we give them the opportunity to learn from us. Not only do we need to do that, but we also need to give them opportunities to practice. And this is in part where some of the time problem comes from. Because I teach communication skills in the Sloan School, it is time-consuming to help somebody learn to present. It's time-consuming to learn, to help them learn how to be a member of a team. And so we need to persuade the faculty to give up some of that valuable time to, again, redress the balance. We know from research, by the way, that if we teach these kinds of transferable skills independent of the content, that we do not do as good a job in helping students learn. We need to marry the two to have the two intertwined. So I said that the third point was to help persuade the faculty, and I'm hoping that the 2 university presidents who are sitting on the podium with me will perhaps do that. I'm showing you a montage of students at MIT because I very much believe that this is what we owe them, a first-rate education. But the challenge and the opportunity is how do we make use of the rich body of knowledge about learning that we have at our disposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lori Preslos, for your stimulating and encouraging speeches. And she also emphasized improving the teachings by focusing on learning. And also, we need a balance between teaching and learning. And we always emphasize teaching from the professors. And we have to harmonize, we have to balance. So in a way, we can create really new creativity. Thank you for your excellent lectures, speeches. Get you the big hand. Now we finished the 3 presentation. We're now in the discussions. We have two discussants. One is the Professor Sung-Chul Park. He is a provost of the Academic and Faculty Affairs at Sungkyunkwan University. Also, we have very distinguished discussant from Japan. He is a president of the well-known, very famous Ritsumeikan University in Japan. That's the most revolutionized update, new, the reforming all the educational content or program. And Dr. Kawaguchi Kiyohumi, and he came late because there was some duplication between two sessions. Would you please stand up for the Kawaguchi? Please stand up as a big hand. And this time, and is in the order of the paper, Professor Sung-Chul Park will present. He will use some kind of the PowerPoint for his discussion. Not too long, okay?
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Chairman. And we already listened to 3 excellent lectures. And let me review. Let me review the few keywords of analysis of the 3 lectures. The mostly diversity, multiculturalism, human interactions, breadth of mind, and the grounding in ethnic, creativity, creative design, global context, innovation, learn how to learn. Okay. Then how we pursuing this kind of big idea into the education for next generation. Here is the example I would like to discuss. Okay, actually we reformed general education. The general education, I better say, liberal education is very important for not only research university, but also in the general college also. Okay. The key issue is, for example, promotion of universal welfare and peace, self-rectification as a means to govern others, benevolence, righteousness, propriety, and wisdom. This is the key issue of the general education reform. So let me introduce to my institute, and one of the best teaching program in this institute to pursuing this idea is academic speech and academic discussions and academic writing. Okay? From Socrates, from Greek to Gongzi in China, even in nowadays, best teaching and best learning is discussions. Okay? So we have a very extensive discussion programs and writing and speech. This will understand diversity and convergence, and we forming a learning community. The small learning community always discuss together, speak together, learn together for the academic issues. Okay? And the other one is we reinforce basic science and mathematics programs. And the basic science and mathematics is very important because it's a real fundamental and the real ground for the future breakthrough science and technology. So all the students should take at least 18 credit hours of mathematics, physics, chemistry, and biology. And all this class should delivered by English, because it is global language, and basic science and mathematics is real global language for the science and technology. And we form a very small learning community, like as a TELA in MIT. It is kind of mini size of TEAL. So even professors, teachers give lectures, but we form a small group, very extensive discussion group for the basic science. As a fact, it is much effective than what we teach basic science and mathematics by Korean. English is much effective because we form a small learning community group. They always discuss science and technology in various different subjects of engineering. Okay? And another one is we build up a new field and a new way of education. As an example, Department of Energy Science and Technology and Department of Energy Interaction Science, and we're going to launch up the cognitive science and technology pretty soon. This is the future problem we have to solve, okay? And the very last, we build up the International Alliance in Education. Previously, Research Alliance is very popular in the world, but Education Alliance or collaborative education is not popular yet. So we build up the Songyungan University and Beijing University for China studies, and we build up the Songyungan University and Kelly School in Indiana for global management, and even we build up the MBA program with Sloan School from MIT. There's alliance. So we have dual degree program either going to pursue the globalization and share the spirit, share the idea, share the culture for internationally. Okay, let me close my discussions. Thank you.
Sorry for cutting your speeches with two tight schedules. And this time we'd like to introduce the President Kawaguchi Kiyohumi from the Ritsumeikan University in Japan.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
And I'm sorry to be late. Three of presentations are all very impressive and very informative, and I completely agree this emphasis on learning and liberal education. And as I presented yesterday, our university also think the same line. But I dare to ask you of all, these presentations are, of course, from American perspective, from the American perspective. And maybe European approach is different. Actually, I joined Japan-UK Higher Education Forum in London last February. UK people emphasis on employability. And actually, I visited a new university, so-called university, transferred from former polytechnic. They developed very much on occupational education, journalism and welfare, and such and so on. And in the Japan and Korean context, we need to help students to get job. In that sense, how to link the university education to workplace is also our purpose. So what do you think about the concept employability? That is my question.
Thank you, the President Kiyohumi. And we listened three excellent presentations from the U.S., main U.S. And now we have about 10 minutes left. And after listening all the presentation, I'd like to hear some word from the President David. Skoltons.
Well, just as Dr. Breslow said that she was not an expert in physics, which I'm sure is not true, that I'm definitely not an expert in education, but what I would say to a very difficult question that Kawaguchi-sensei has raised, if I could paraphrase it, how do we deal with cultural sensitivity of these ideas or cultural specificity of these ideas that we're talking about? And I couldn't hope to answer the question, but just reinforce the question you are asking. We're giving, by the nature of the session, it's strictly speaking an American perspective. Even though our schools have plentiful numbers of international students, still the research is done in the context of the American cultural construct. And the one thing I would say, Kawaguchi-sensei, is that it would be presumptuous, I think, at least for me, to give you advice about what would work in a different cultural construct. The one thing I could hope for is that the kind of research that Dr. Breslow has commented on, much of which I'm going to assume was done in a Western context, perhaps the best thing would be to foster that kind of research and effort in every cultural context, so that in the context of Japanese or Korean or East or Southeast Asian culture, the same effort and funding could be put to research relevant to that context, but trying to answer your question. I couldn't hope to answer your question, but that's why I call you sensei.
Okay, thank you. President Miller, can you say a few words?
Well, there's not a lot I can add. I think President Skorton made a very excellent analogy here of thinking about the pattern of research and applying it across different cultural contexts in order to learn what works in your context. I know there is some research that is done on people from East Asia and people from the US and the way they visualize things. A lot has to do with the way the language works and the way your brain is wired when you're young. When you're learning a language from characters, which are visual recognition, your brain wires in a different way. And I know the creativity studies show that students see different things when shown the same pictures. Students in America often see the object in the center of the picture. Students in Asia see the objects around the edges of the picture as being most memorable. So there's a lot of reasons to question whether the approaches that are used in the West are directly applicable to the opportunities that you see in the Far East.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Lori Breslow?
He said what I was going to say. I was going to talk about that research, which I know as well. So I will address the other part of your question, which was about employability, to say that there are great debates, I think, in the United States just around this issue. And I think President Skorton did a very good job of trying to connect what people have sometimes criticized as being not the kind of learning that will help people to get employed, but in fact that this kind of learning does provide skills that can be used in a variety of settings, and so in fact we are teaching for employability. But I have to say that this is a huge debate in the U.S. about what is the role of the university. Is it for employability or is it to do something else? So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. Any word from the President Kyo-Fumi? You want to say it?
Yeah, I may give a second part of his answer. Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, we made some customized education, so-called. Okay. As an example, we built up the Department of Semiconductor System Engineering, and we joined this department with Samsung Electronics, and we teach 100 students, and after they educated, they just go into the Samsung Electronics. So it is a kind of customized education. But it is a real high level of education, not like real technical college or not that kind of level. But the best students select, teach semiconductor extensively, and send them 100% into Samsung Electronics, and 100% tuition come from Samsung Electronics.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
This is one of the examples.
Okay. President Kawachi, you want to say a few words more?
Yes, I have just one word. We, Ritsumkan, we also don't have occupational education itself, but we do have career education. Students must have their, develop their own career. So they have to find their own lifetime career development. So we need to help them to develop by themselves to how to create their career design and the ability to work. That is our education reform.
Thank you. And I think, okay, now we have about 5 to 10 minutes for floor. I'd like to invite.
I have three small questions for three presenters. First question to President Scotton. Actually, you were talking about that in some indices that 8th grade students in the United States are not performing very well these days. But you know, the system of education which we are following in Asia is being copied, or I don't want to use the word copied. It is being implemented by seeing the Western type of education. So is there maybe any other reason that these days these indices are going down apart from culture or some other stuffs? This is the first question to Dr. Cotton. Shall I go with the question?
I think the one question from the one person.
Yes, it's a very small question, and sorry if you agree me. And the second question is that I was very much impressed by the Olin College, concept. Whether you have planned to just like MIT and other institutes going to foreign countries to have their own campus. Why don't you implement this concept? Means first come, first service will be the better one. The third question for you is that actually is the space is having influence on the teaching learning aspect, which you have shown the photograph, which is that group type of learning. These are the three questions. Sorry if it
Okay, I'd like to invite 2 more questions. Please identify yourself first. Make a very short questions. We have limited time. We'll after having the question, and then we'll answer all together. Okay.
Hello, my name is Hye-suk Kim from Yonsei University. My concern is that most professors are ready and very good at content knowledge, but they are not prepared to teach transferable skills such as problem solving, critical thinking, etc. So I wonder how can we solve this problem? And is it a good strategy to establish a new course which focus on writing or communication like that? Thank you.
Okay. One more question? Okay.
Hello, I'm Ho-jun Kim from Busan National University. I'd like to ask a question to President Scotton and Dr. Breslow. Today, Korean universities have facing difficulties with high ratio of student to faculty. And as far as I know, Cornell and MIT both are research universities and have a big size university. So how your universities are sustaining some kind of smart, excellent teaching and also interactive communication from students to faculty? And do you have some strategies to sustain those kind of teaching?
Okay, thank you. And President Scotton, you like quickly answer?
I have to answer both of these questions with a lot of humility because I don't consider myself an expert on the underlying area. So I'm just going to give you an editorial opinion, if you can understand what I'm saying. It's an opinion. I have a chance to see many things, but don't have the knowledge base, for example, that Professor Breslow has. In terms of your question, I think that one of the issues in our country, in the U.S., is the fact that education standards, if I could use the term, education goals are very locally controlled. And we don't have enormous dependence on any national standards. In fact, I'm talking not about higher education, but about the primary and secondary education. And in fact, we have a very decentralized system that's protected politically very strongly. I'm not arguing it's right or it's wrong, but it's almost the logical opposite of the way preparatory systems utilize college entrance examinations, for example, in the Republic of Korea. So perhaps the variation that we find locally can have something to do with it. That's a personal opinion from working in some areas of K-12 in a political sense, not a professional sense. And in terms of the question that the colleague was asking about how are we doing, you're implied we're doing such a terrific job in the U.S., and I don't know that we're doing such a terrific job. You saw, for example, Dr. Breslow, one of the very most advanced areas of thinking in the United States, and the first charter president of the one-of-a-kind in the planet organization like Olin. I don't think you would generalize this level of excellence across all the universities in the U.S., but I would make one statement. The U.S. spends enormous amount of money on scientific research. We always wish it was more, but compared to anywhere else in the world, we have spent a huge amount on faculty-initiated research. We spend a tiny fraction of that on research into the educational process, especially research in the educational process that precedes post-secondary education, so primary and secondary. And one of the things that I spend some time on is trying to convince leaders in my country that it would be good to spend some money on the educational process in terms of research and rigorous testing so that we are preparing in some more logical way an answer to your question. So maybe if you ask me, I'm counting on being invited back many more times, 10 years from now at the Global Forum number 13 or 14, maybe I'll have a better answer for you. And I want to thank everyone and apologize for leaving, but it's a pleasure to learn from all of you, and hope to talk to you soon, Dr. Kim.
Okay. Mr. Miller, can you answer in 2 or 3 minutes?
Yes, very quickly. The question was, does Olin have a plan to build a campus abroad? What are we planning to do about globalization? The answer is no. We have no plans at this point to build a campus abroad. We are visited, I would imagine, once or twice a month by universities from abroad who are very interested. A lot of them these days are starting their own new universities. And we're quite interested in helping them to get started, maybe to use some of the same philosophies. We have a very special mission to constantly remain an experimental institute, essentially, that's trying new things. And if we find an international partner who has the same kind of vision and an interest in developing a program which is quite parallel, we might be interested in talking with them.
Thank you. And I think that this session is a very key session in this forum. And in the 21st century, we need a creativity. We need a globalization. This is a really important section. This is all globalization and creativity should be educated in the undergraduate education, not the graduate school. But these days in Korea, we emphasize too much on researches. And the government funded this way. I think with this occasion, the government also should encourage how to revolutionize the college education. And I'd like just a few sentences. It is a very difficult task to accurately predict the demand of the knowledge-based society on university college education. What you teach and learn, how it is taught and learned will drastically change in a few decades. So far, we have not seen a country that is fully equipped with a system of college education ideal for the coming 21st century societies. Surely, it is a blueprint that demand of new education will be far different from what we are doing right now. I think this session is, I'm very thankful for the excellent speakers from US, Japan, even Korea. And thank you for your good attendance. Thank you very much.